Hello and welcome back to the Fell Football Podcast, which is now available on YouTube for the very first time. If you're listening on Spotify, nothing will change. If you're watching on YouTube, well, here's my face. And I'm delighted to say, to kick off our NFL draft coverage this year, we are joined by the co-host of the Stay Hot Pod, Theo Ash. Theo, how's it going?
It's going great. It's going great. I am in the swing of things now. I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on just about every first round prospect at least, and now can start to focus on finding the day two guys that I like, which is always a good point to get to in the process. So yeah, I'm feeling good about the draft. It's a great draft and excited to be on.
Love to hear it. We'll be covering a few topics today, some prospects talk, and finish with a little mock draft at the end. We're going to be talking wide receivers at the top of the draft, the first defensive player drafted, and then obviously talk a little bit about Theo's Green Bay Packers. Let's kick off then with the big three wide receivers really in this draft, which are Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Odunze, and Malik Neighbors. Marvin Harrison Jr., the consensus wide receiver one, I would say, out of these guys, although there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors about what people would want you to believe. Theo, do you think that the sort of smoke screens that we're hearing about Malik Neighbors potentially being the number one guy on some people's boards is true, or do you think everyone's got Marvin Harrison as the number one guy? They just want him to fall to them.
I do think that there are some teams that have neighbors wide receiver one like is being reported. I think I've seen enough of draft analysts that I respect saying they're in the similar tier, they're in the same tier. And we've seen in the past these explosive wide receivers go higher than people expect. Henry Ruggs was wide receiver one a couple years ago over a guy like CeeDee Lamb because he brought that explosive element. A more successful case study might be Jalen Waddle, who went sixth overall a couple years ago, who and as a top 10 pick or borderline top 5 pick, that surprised some people how high he went. He didn't go over Jamar Chase, but he went crazy high. So when you look at Neighbors, you see him move around at a different speed than Adunze and Marvin Harrison can. Like when he turns upfield, his ability after the catch with the ball in his hands is something that those other guys don't have. So if you're an offense that likes to get guys in motion and have them run crossers right off the snap with a free release, and you're trying to copy the Dolphins, or you are the Dolphins. Like I think there are some teams out there who would love the speed of Neighbors over the X receiver, that isolation winner skill set that Marvin Harrison has. So I do think there are some teams with Neighbors over Marv, but I look at what Marv did, double teamed more than anybody else in college football with Kyle McCord, who couldn't hang around at Ohio State as his quarterback. The numbers that he put up, I think he is situation proof. I think that he'll be able to produce anywhere. And I Neighbors isn't quite to that level yet, where he's just a walk in day one, most polished guy in a receiver room, like dominant player, I think.
So we've got Marvin Harrison Jr. up here. Then we've got Rome Odunze, obviously, as well in the conversation. How do you see Odunze and Neighbors? Do you think when they go in the draft after Harrison, do you think it'll be more down to sort of scheme fit or team fit? Or do you think there's teams in this draft that just see one guy as better than the other? Or do you think like a team like the Giants, who sort of need that big body receiver, would maybe look at Odunze over Neighbors, or someone like the Cardinals or the Bears, sort of the speed and the elite separation?
I think that Odunze at 6'4" and over 200 pounds, like he's big, he's huge, he's a little bit, I think, slower than the top two guys that we're talking about here, Neighbors and Marvin Harrison. And I think there is a bit of a perceived tier below those two that Odunze slots in, from what I've heard. And I think that comes down to the high end athleticism. Is he going to be able to separate? Is he going to be able to run away from people? Personally, I think that Odunze is a very similar player to Marvin Harrison. I do think that he's got more speed than a lot of the analysts say that he does. He tested at the combine really well, ran fast, and when he wants to, he can really close the space. He's got long strides. Sometimes I think he is moving faster than it appears that he is because he is so big. So I really like Odunze as well. He catches absolutely everything. I think he's a bit more nuanced as a route runner than Malik Neighbors as well. So he's got some skills that are over Neighbors to me, and I have him ranked slightly higher. But what you can expect from this draft, from everything that I've heard, is Neighbors going above him because Neighbors truly takes the top off and is in a different tier with the ball in his hands. And yeah, people get thinking about Tyreek Hill and Antonio Brown and Waddle when they see Neighbors. So I do think that for some it's a tier where Marv and Neighbors are ahead of Adunze. But for me, I think it's Adunze and Marv who are elite at everything. And then Neighbors is super athletic. He's crazy. I think he'll be great. But he does need a little bit more seasoning from a route running standpoint, in my opinion, and isn't quite as dominant as at the catch point as those two guys. So the three of them are all great. That's how I have them tiered. And also, I think what you can expect from the GMs and what I'm hearing about the draft.
I think we'd be a little bit remiss not to talk about the Buffalo Bills, who earlier on today traded Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans, another massive addition for the Texans, who are having, on paper, a very good offseason. Do you think the Bills can maybe get in the conversation for one of these three guys, or are they more looking towards the Brian Thomas Jr. if they can trade up and get high enough? Can they get into the top 10 realistically?
I mean, anything is possible. How far up did Falcons get Julio Jones? I think they traded way, way up. Maybe even twice they traded up, like got to the middle part and then traded up again. I do think that the Bills could be looking at something like that. Their wide receiver room is super sparse. They're trying to get past the Chiefs. Maybe it's time for a big swing at the wide receiver position. As a Packers fan, I would appreciate it if they could trade up ahead of Chicago and get any of these guys before Chicago swoops them up and builds, I don't know, Keenan in the slot, DJ outside, and Neighbors opposite him or Dunze opposite him. That doesn't sound very fun to me. I think that any of those guys combined with Josh Allen could be all pro type of players their rookie year. So a trade up into the top 10 isn't impossible, but there's also a guy, Brian Thomas Jr., in this draft. He plays with Neighbors. He's taller than Neighbors and he ran faster, as fast as Neighbors is. I'm talking about it. Waddle, he's like Waddle, he's like Tyreek Hill, he's so fast. Brian Thomas Jr. is a freak because he takes the top off too, and he's even taller. I mean, he could be really, really good. He is a special athlete. The problem is he didn't have the production that Neighbors did. Um, doesn't quite have an understanding of route running to the extent that Neighbors does, and in turn, Neighbors doesn't have that like Marvin Harrison does. So Brian Thomas Jr., I think, is a couple steps down in terms of how he runs routes down the field in that LSU offense. A lot of the times, what they do is have one guy run a hitch, and that guy would be aligned closest to the sideline. And then the dude in the slot would run a fade, and you would read the corner over the guy on the outside. And if he stayed down on the hitch, you could throw the fade. And they would just, all of college just spams this over and over and over again. So when you watch Neighbors and Brian Thomas, really all they're really running are these hitches and fades seemingly over and over and over again. So Brian Thomas definitely has a lot of work that needs to be done as a route runner. I think that his catch technique and body control is below where Neighbors is at, and his ability after the catch is below where Neighbors is at. But man, as catching deep bombs from Josh Allen, 6'4", 4.3 speed, like good at the catch point. I could see them maybe not being able to trade up super high for the big three, but they need a wide receiver. They have the ammo to trade up, and I think Brian Thomas Jr. Being a freak deep threat with a freak deep ball thrower in Josh Allen would be really, really tempting for the Bills.
I think that's definitely in play for now in the first round. I know a lot of mocks that we saw sort of in recent weeks before the news that came out today still had the Bills taking receiver in the first round. So it was obviously a
Mm-hmm.
need before. I mean, their room right now is what? Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir,
Shakir, who's their third guy now? I just saw the tweet and I've already forgotten who it is. It's
and
is
I think it's
Sherfield
someone.
still there? I don't know.
Well,
It's
they've just
Knox.
got yeah,
Knox is their
Kincaid.
de facto wide
Yeah,
receiver one at this point. But
I know it's not looking good. The Bills have been their off season's been weird to me because they're sort of stripping away all these assets. You know, they cut a lot of players, traded
mhm.
Diggs, but the Bills Super Bowl window is sort of always open as long as Josh Allen's playing quarterback. So they're a hard team for me to sort of work out with the moves they've made, considering how good they can be. But yeah, it's the latest of the strange moves. But I think Brian Thomas Jr. would be pretty electric in that offense, and that is a move that I would like to see them make in the first round. Speaking of the first round, it is expected to largely be an offensive first round this year. I think the current odds have it as about 21-11 in favor of offense, and most people expect the first 7 picks to be offense. And then we get to the Atlanta Falcons, who most people are predicting a Dallas Turner edge to go to. So that could be one potential route for the first defense player in the draft. But do you think maybe a cornerback, and a lot of hype early in the process was Terry Arnold? He was sort of that guy at between 8 to 13 in mock drafts, but he's cooled a little bit. When you're Mitchell, who is Aaron Salido, he's a very, very good corner. His tape matches up very nicely. He's looking good. There's a couple of other edges, Jared Verse, Laitu Latu. Where do you see the sort of first defensive player in the draft coming? Will it be at 8, and will it be Dallas Turner?
8 could be a potential trade up spot if the Bills really do want to move up super high for a receiver ahead of Chicago, if that's the path they want to choose, or someone else potentially for a quarterback getting up ahead of the Vikings and the Broncos at 11 and 12. So I think that they could trade out. Obviously, anybody really can, but yeah, it would make a lot of sense for them to go defense at the number 8 overall pick. And my personal favorite defensive player of the draft is Leatu Latu. He to me is edge 1 and defensive player 1 by uh, not a small margin. Not a small margin. There's really no one else that has captured me the way his tape has. He is, I mean, he's Neo from the Matrix. I don't know if anybody in the NFL has hands as fast as Latu's. He had a rep going around the corner, I believe, versus Oregon State. And I legitimately, like, he got by the guy and I was like, what happened here? And the tackle was using both hands independently. He shot his inside hand. Latu Latu batted that away, and then the outside hand came and Latu batted that away and just went around the outside edge and bended. And I was like, and it once I slowed it down, I'm like, okay, that's what he did. But it just happened so fast on the film where I was like, it was just an absolute blur. And I watched defensive players in the NFL all day. It's hardly a time where I just don't even see the hands move at all. And I'm like, that was too fast for me to even pick up on the naked eye. Like Myles Garrett has some times like that where it almost appears that he teleports, and Latu doesn't have that kind of explosiveness, but he has those kinds of hands. So I think that that's a trait that raises his ceiling to a higher degree than is being talked about. People think of Dallas as the high upside guy in this draft because he had a great combine, and he did have a great combine. He's a very versatile athlete. He can do everything you ask him to do. But Latu has all those traits as well. Like, he has great bend and he has great speed to power. And he can hold up against the run. Like, I think he has a better frame definitely at 265 pounds than Dallas Turner does. And yeah, he shows great play strength, better than Turner's in my opinion. So I love Latu Latu. He's more productive than anybody else in the class by far. He's about as productive as an edge rusher can possibly be coming out of college at any time. So Latu to me is checking every single box outside of obviously the medicals, which I'm not privy to. He had to medically retire years ago when he played at Washington, took a year off from football, then came back and dominated these last 2 seasons. So I am a big fan of Latu Latu. I like the corners. I like Nate Wiggins especially. I like Kamari Lassiter. I think they're all pretty legit. Um, and the other edges as well. Like, I see what is useful about Dallas Turner and Verse and Chop and those guys, but Latu Latu is different, and I don't know if I would bet on him being the first overall defensive player taken because of the injury stuff. It really does sound like it's going to be Dallas Turner, but in my opinion, like, Latu is a huge prize.
And just touching on the corners, we'll move on to the Green Bay Packers and what they could do in the first round this year. Nate Wiggins is a guy who has been very popular in mocks with the Green Bay Packers. Firstly, would corner make you happy as a pick, or is there somewhere else that you want them to go?
Corner would make me pretty happy. It would be expected based on how the Packers usually draft. There are certain positions they tend to avoid. They really, as good as they are at developing offensive linemen, they don't really take them in the first round. It hardly happens. A wide receiver, they never take. They don't really need a wide receiver this year anyway. They don't need a quarterback. Um, I think they could go offensive line, even though it doesn't happen very often. Graham Barton is a pretty easy projection if he's there. Um, who knows who else? It's a good line class. Barton is the name that really sticks out, like where he's being mocked, like what the Packers need. It seems like a very natural fit. But a lot of the times they like to go defense with that first round draft pick. It's been the case my entire life. And Latu would be great if he falls because of the medicals, but Wiggins is my favorite corner. And he's more polished than Stokes was coming out, I think, like just a better cover guy. He's fast like Stokes is. It's something they value. I could see it. Him, Stokes, and Jair being the three starters. I think that would give you uh, a pretty good secondary, and they're going to be playing a lot of cover one and coverage. It sounds like this year under the new defensive coordinator Halfley. So yeah, I definitely think that Wiggins would be a good pick for the Packers.
All right, perfect. Okay, so here we go. We have got our mock draft up on the screen. Do you want to take odds or evens? We didn't really speak about this.
Let me go odd. Let me go odds.
Okay, are we gonna allow trades or not? This is PFN,
Let's
so they're cool.
let's keep it simple. No trades. Just go straight
All
on
right,
through.
all right, I like it.
And
Well then, go on.
I'm on the clock with number one, and I'll take Caleb Williams for the Bears. I like May a lot as well, but Caleb is just so cerebral. He's so instinctive. He's so accurate. He's great.
It's been the worst kept secret for a very long time, as much as the Justin Fields fan club would try and have you believe. I do think that maybe Jaden Daniels is in play here. But I think when it comes down to it, ultimately, the Commanders are probably going to take the guy with the higher floor and the guy who reminds everyone a lot of Justin Herbert. That's a lot of one of the comparisons coming out of the draft. They're going to take Drake May.
The Patriots are interesting. There's so much smoke for Jaden Daniels to go here. Personally, I don't think that Jaden Daniels is profiling as a franchise quarterback, at least not to the degree where I am confident in taking him and leaving potential gold jacket guys on the table. Like Marvin Harrison Jr. is very special. Joe Alt is very special, but they need a quarterback in the worst way. And there has been just so much smoke about Jaden. He's been here the entire time, really, like since he won the Heisman. It's been talked about like he'll be in play for the Patriots at number three. So for the sake of this mock draft, I'll take Jaden, but I'm not sure if it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are probably one of the teams who are likely to trade down. There's a lot of noise coming out of that, coming out of there now about them trading down, accumulating picks because the roster is by nowhere, by no means just a quarterback away. You know, they need a lot of sort of surgery on the roster, and that leads me to the Arizona Cardinals, who are another trade down candidate, I think. But in this scenario, they get the easy decision they will have to make, and that is Marvin Harrison Jr. to add to their very depleted wide receiver room. They obviously lost Hollywood Brown to the Chiefs, so Marvin Harrison Jr. is an Arizona Cardinal.
Yeah, and then with the Chargers, I think they might be another candidate to trade down. I look at their corner room. It's like, where are the starters? Their linebacker room, their interior defensive line. They could use more offensive linemen, and of course, wide receiver is a sore need that is damn near the entire roster. So if they wanted to trade down and stockpile picks, I would not be surprised. But to me, their most glaring need is probably receiver, and my second favorite receiver after Marv is actually Rome Odunze, not Malik Neighbors. Even though Neighbors is more explosive, I like Rome slightly more. I do think that Larry Fitzgerald is, a very, very lofty comp, but it does kind of remind me of him. I think that Rome could be very, very special, so I'll take Rome.
I definitely see that. I hadn't really thought of that before, but I actually do see that now that you mention it. So I don't think that's a million miles away. The Giants are another sort of probably not a trade down candidate. I think they'll
No.
probably just take best player available here. They There's a lot of talk about quarterback potentially here as well. They might even trade up for a quarterback, but I do think they'll run it back with Jones for another year. I think they've got an out at the end of next year, so I think if he is not great again, they'll look to move on. But For me, the Giants' desperate need of receiver. I believe Sterling Shepard is currently the number one receiver with Darius Slayton. So it's not a great room, and Malik Neighbors falls to them very nicely here.
That would be a great pick. I think that's if it felt like this, that's what I would do if I was them. I don't think I would take JJ in this situation over a guy like Neighbors. And then for the Titans, they sorely need offensive line help. It's been, a wet piece of paper, guys charging through these last couple of years, making the situation for their quarterbacks untenable. They brought in Dillard from the Eagles, a former first round pick that couldn't get playing time there. He didn't have any untapped potential. So left tackle at the top of their list of needs after being aggressive everywhere else all offseason. Joe Alt to me is a monster. He it seems like he has four pairs of hands. Like edges will do a move on him and like knock his hands away, and they'll be like, "Sweet, I beat him," and then they're just like somehow right back. Like he does it. He's so balanced. It's terrifying that he's like 6'9", and he'll play below you. Like as an edge rusher coming down, you're probably looking down at him because his pad level is so low. He's a terrifying offensive line prospect. I really like Joe Alt, so that will be my selection.
I feel like Alt to the Titans at 7 is going to be the most popular mock draft pick, maybe of all time. I don't think I've read a single one without Joe Alt going at 7, or at least a tackle.
and
I think.
and at
Go on.
8 too, Dallas Turner. These
Well,
two
I
seem
know
like
here
I
we
would see the
are
same
with
thing.
we just had our conversation obviously about the first defensive player in the draft, and the Falcons could be on track to take one if they don't trade down. And in this scenario, as much as I do like Latu, I think there are definite concerns over the medicals, which I think potentially could cause him to slide. Obviously, we don't know, like you said, we don't know the ins and outs, but just from what people are saying around the league, the medicals are definitely going to feature as one of the main concerns. So Dallas Turner to the Falcons, the basic selection, we will go with it again.
I'm here with the Bears at number 9. I think one of their big needs is edge, and so I might go with Latu here, even though the medicals are a concern. The thing about the medicals is I don't know either way. Either it could be that he went through the combine and teams didn't really find much, and he's been so productive and he's played through it without missing time for 2 seasons now. Like it was scary that he had a neck injury. It was scary that he had a medically retire. But so did Jalen Phillips, and he went in the first round, and he was very productive until an Achilles injury that had nothing to do with his previous ones. So maybe with that as the context, and maybe like there's not that much to be concerned about with Latu. There's all this speculation that he could fall very far in the draft, but what if a team just sees an elite edge and says, I want that guy on my team, and the Bears have a need opposite of Sweat in the worst way. So I'll go with Latu for Chicago at number 9.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a viable pick. I think Chicago could probably go in a number of places. I think they're also. I feel like we said about half the teams in the top 10 could trade down. I think Chicago only have 4 picks in the whole draft, so I think they're definitely maybe a team that could
True.
trade down and look to add some more further down the line. The Jets at 10, I think everyone was pretty much putting a tackle here, but because they've added obviously Terrence Smith. I think tackle's definitely still obviously a need for the Jets. They've got 2 guys on 1 year deals there, but their window with Aaron Rodgers is so small that I'm just going to give them Brock Bowers because as we know about Brock Bowers, he's not just a tight end; he's just an elite receiver. And I think giving Rodgers another weapon going forward, I think is their tight end one is Tyler Conklin, right? So he's
Yes,
decent.
yes,
He's
yes.
decent. He's good. But if you can add an elite talent like Brock Bowers at 10, and he's definitely a top 5 player in the draft as far as I'm concerned, I think the Jets should jump at the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Brock Bowers to me is probably the third best player in the draft overall for me. I mean, he is unbelievable. Like how he moves and everything he catches. He's crazy. He's crazy. And with the Vikings at number 11, I think I'm going to give them JJ McCarthy, um, a quarterback. I'm not crazy high on the quarterbacks outside of the top 2, but they need someone they can win with. And JJ McCarthy is going to be able to stand in the pocket, and he will absolutely rip it over the middle of the field. So if you're anybody from these Shanahan McVay trees where your overall philosophy is, hey, let's run some play action, or let's run an option, and let's let guys catch it over the middle and run, Like JJ McCarthy is your guy. He will absolutely rip the crossers, rip the digs. Yeah, he struggles a little bit with accuracy outside the numbers. He doesn't throw with much touch. He's a little small. I don't think he's got the craziest overall talent compared to a guy like Drake May. He's like 6'6" and just a monster. But in Minnesota's system with TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, you just need a quarterback who can pilot the thing and you'll win a lot of games. And I think that JJ McCarthy has the skill set to be able to do that. So we'll see if they end up trading up and what that move with Houston earlier in the cycle was all about to get 23. But if they can get JJ McCarthy at 11, that's even better.
It is even better for them, and it's not great as a Denver fan, as myself, who is very much looking forward to another year of quarterback limbo. I This is a tough situation for Denver because the mock drafts that have us taking corner are sort of driving me insane. I think it's a need, obviously, but I don't think it's the need. I'm going to take Jared Verse in this situation. I think the Broncos obviously have to get way better up front, and Jared Verse is going to be a guy who's going to do that. They've got players like Baron Browning, Jonathan Cooper, seventh round pick, who are sort of like edge two guys. They'll get like 8 or 9 sacks a season. Really need to be looking out for the guy. You know, we have obviously once upon a time had Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, which seemed like an absolute lifetime ago now. We've downgraded quite a lot in that time, and it's about time that Denver got someone who can get after the quarterback. And I think 27th in pressures percentage last year, so definitely needs to get way better at getting after the opposition at QB.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then their division rivals trying to chase down the Chiefs. They're not very close to them, are they? The Raiders and the Broncos. But I think that I like Troy Fautanu here. He is a bit farther down the board. I guess he's 17th on this board, and I'm picking at 13. A lot of people prefer Fashanu Fuaga. I like Fautanu a lot. I think that he is super versatile. The guard play was atrocious in Las Vegas last year. He can line up there. It's very rare that you see an offensive lineman with a bag. Like they try all different kinds of moves, and you just never know what you're gonna see them do on the field. Like usually they're kind of predictable and do the same thing over and over. But with Fontenot, it's like he will do anything to get the guy on the ground, and he's so good out in space. I absolutely love him and his versatility. So they need some line help, and that's what I'm giving them.
He's definitely one of the biggest rises that I've seen in the process so far. I think he was sort of billed as a between the sort of 25 and 35 range, but he's definitely come into consideration for a lot of teams in the. I do think we're not doing trades, but I think a lot of teams will be eyeing up trades for tackles in this sort of range. The Raiders range did the
Mm-hmm.
Broncos. If they can't get a QB, they might go back as well. And I'm going to take another
Yeah,
tackle here. The Saints, who there's doubt whether Ryan Ramczyk will play. I believe. I think he's maybe
yeah,
not playing at all next season. So that pushes tackle right up to their number one need, I'd say. And I'm going to take Talese Fuaga here to shore up that offensive line for the New Orleans Saints. Past that, I mean, I did originally have Byron Murphy here once upon a time in my last
mhm.
mock, but I think now that obviously they have lost Ramczyk, that tackle is their biggest glaring need.
Yeah. And then I've got the Colts at number 15. I think I might take Brian Thomas Jr. I know we talked about him, the Bills, and they might need to trade up for him, but we're not doing trades in this mock. And someone who's a little similar to Josh Allen is Anthony Richardson, and their deep threat, Alec Pierce, was one of the least, if not the least, productive receiver on a per route basis last year. I think that Brian Thomas Jr. could give them what they're looking for in terms of someone who can take the top off, someone who Anthony Richardson can just throw it up to and he'll come down with it. I think that is a lot of athleticism for one offense. Last year, the Colts went all in on athleticism. They had like the Horace RAS draft of all time or something like that. I look for them to continue it this year and take a vertical threat in Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, and obviously the Colts seem to have just re-signed absolutely everyone who was a free agent this year, including Julian Blackman yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, I did I do think corner is definitely going to be very high on their list as well. I think that's definitely a position where the first corner in our
Definitely.
draft could come off the board. Seattle at 16 is it's kind of a weird one. There's not really like a massive need. Obviously, guard. We've got Jackson Powers Johnson who can play center or guard, I believe. They need center as well. The more I read about Jackson Powers Johnson is the media a lot and the sort of draft world is a lot higher on him than the league are. I think I read that last week. So
Yep.
it kind of makes me a bit hesitant to take him this high, but just for the purpose of this draft, we will take him here. Obviously, they do need to get better. Their offensive line last year was pretty terrible, and if they're still relying on Geno Smith, who is had a down year ish, but I mean, it was still a very good year for a quarterback like Geno Smith. So they need to get way better up front. So we'll take Jackson Powers Johnson here, who can slot into center or guard.
Yeah, I thought his film was great. It seems like maybe he has some medical issues that
That
like
might be
there
the
are
reason.
whispers of that
Yeah.
on social media. But and he's just center, so sometimes the positional value there. But I love him. I'd take him at 16 based on what I saw on film. And then for the Jaguars, I'll go with Fashanu here. He is a little bit raw. I think he needs to time up his punch a little better, like get in better position for the running game and make more of an impact there. But man, his redirection ability and his anchor are very special. I think a team would be very lucky to get him at number 17 overall because he has a very high ceiling as a pass protector and just as a player overall. Uh, the Jaguars have Cam Robinson at left tackle. They paid him somewhat recently, but it really hasn't been working out. I think that they needed to do something to make that offensive line better. It was their primary issue last year, the offensive line. So they brought a lot of guys back. They added Mitch Morse, but this would really be supercharging potentially their offensive line with some real high end talent. So I like this.
Very nice. The Bengals are a team I feel have drafted a tackle in the first round like 4 out of the last 8 years. I'm going to go for another one here in Amarius Mims. Their sort of never-ending cycle of Bengals offensive line not being good enough has to end at some point, and obviously Orlando Brown Jr., I believe they brought in last year was semi-decent, but the Bengals need to get both positions on the offensive line, the bookend tackles locked down. So we'll give Amaris Mims to the Bengals here.
Yeah, and then I've got the Rams at number 19. Let me get Johnny Newton here. Maybe they just lost a defensive tackle that was pretty good. You may have heard of him, Aaron Donald.
Donald
Johnny
guy? Yeah,
Newton
yeah.
is no Aaron Donald. Yeah, yeah. Johnny Newton is no Aaron Donald. Byron Murphy is a little bit more in that mold, but Newton as a penetrating three technique, he's got all the moves. He's got bend to win the corner and flatten towards the quarterback like an edge rusher does. He's strong at the point of attack. Like his film, he just straight up dominates games. Like he's maybe not as twitchy, maybe not quite as unique taking on doubles as an undersized guy like Byron Murphy is, but he's just dominant. So let me get Johnny Newton to the Rams as the Donald replacement.
Yeah, I think that's definitely at the top of their priority list now that they lost arguably one of the greatest defensive players of all time. The Steelers next, who I'm tempted to take Cooper DeJean here, who obviously coming off broken leg. There's not medical concerns maybe, but just sort of concerns over whether he's ready. I believe he's got his pro day this week, so I'm sure we'll learn a lot more about where DeJean goes in the process later on this week. I'm again going to go tackle though. The Steelers are a team who have struggled massively with their offensive line, and unfortunately for them, their quarterback next season is Russell Wilson, who is incredibly bad at incredibly good at taking sacks, depending on which way you see it, or Justin Fields, who is also incredibly good or bad at taking sacks. Yeah, they need to get better up front. If their quarterbacks are going to be Fields and Wilson, then I will wish their offensive line all the best for getting blamed for every sack next year. So yeah, that's where the Steelers need
Yeah.
to get a little bit better, I think.
I mean, Latham is used to it. He blocked for Milrow, who scrambles around as much as anybody. So he's super strong. Like he would be a boon for their running game, which I think that they would enjoy. For the Dolphins, I'm going to go with Terry and Arnold He's the top player on this board that we're using here. X Howard left in free agency. Has he signed anywhere? I haven't seen any news about
I
that,
don't
but
think he
maybe I'm
has.
forgetting.
Him and Justin Simmons are both unsigned, which is a little
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
strange.
But they need help in the secondary. Arnold has great ball skills, good size. He's very fluid, um, very confident person. Like I think that it would be easy for any GM to really fall in love with him when you hear him talk. He really attacks every aspect of his life, it sounds like, with a lot of enthusiasm. So I think that Terrion Arnold will could potentially be the first corner off the board. He could go a lot higher than 21, but just the way it fell, I think that it works out well for Miami.
And the way it's falling here as well, I am going to take Cunha Mitchell for the Eagles. I've considered Cooper DeJean here, as I mentioned before, coming off the broken leg. A little bit of an issue there, but I do think Cunha Mitchell could be the guy for the Eagles here. They need to get better in the secondary. I believe they brought back Reed Blankenship on a 1 year deal this week, so that's sort of lessons they need a safety. Well, I think DeJean he played in the slot as well last year. Is that correct?
He didn't really play in the slot. He just get projects very well there because
Right.
he is such a good tackler. And I do think there are some questions about, his athleticism keeping up with maybe the field stretchers out on the boundary. So he hasn't necessarily had a lot of experience in the slot, but given his skill set, he kind of brings almost a I'm not just saying this because he's white, but he does bring kind of a linebacker mentality to the corner position. So people might want him closer to the ball at safety or corner, and it could mitigate any athletic or stiffness concerns and stiffness concerns that
Yeah.
one may have. But yeah, he is a slot guy to me.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah. Vikings then for you.
I might go with Chop Robinson for them here. I think that he would be a good fit in this Flores defense. Just mug absolutely everybody up at the line of scrimmage. You don't know who's going to blitz. You don't know who's going to drop back. And if Chop gets free rushes, it's very over. His first couple steps are special. I think he had one of the fastest 10-yard splits in the history of the combine. If Flores can scheme up some free runs for him, I mean, he will just teleport to the quarterback and no one's going to be able to outrun him. And he's got some ability dropping into coverage as well. You saw him do that at Penn State. So in this system, I like Chop Robinson.
On to Dallas, and I'm a little bit stuck. I think I'm going to take Graham Barton here. Cowboys are another team who need to improve their offensive line, but looking at this board, yeah, I mean Keon Coleman, I don't think is going to be a first round pick, but the Cowboys, they lost, obviously lost the center Tyler Biadasz, I believe his name is. Perhaps I
Biotish or
pronounce it.
something like
Yeah,
that. I think it's Biotish. Yeah.
yeah, to Washington. And they lost the other guard whose name has escaped me, or the guard whose name has escaped me. Uh,
There's Tyron. There's Biotish. Oh God, McGovern maybe. Is that who you're thinking of?
is he a Jet? Either way, the Cowboys are a team that are probably going to
Yeah,
improve the
yeah, yeah.
offensive line in the draft. So we will take Graham Barton here for them. I think Troy Fatano, obviously, you took him way higher up. I think he'd be a pretty nice fit in Dallas if they were to move up into the teens range to grab him.
No doubt. And the Packers, the same deal. They could use a guard after the departure of their right guard, Royce Newman. And yeah, wait, was it Royce Newman who went to the Giants? Now I'm confused on the names, even though he played for us last year. But yeah, they could really use a guard. But man, with Barton gone, I think my attention does turn to someone who we talked about earlier, and that's Nate Wiggins. I think I don't know exactly how the cornerback room would shuffle there, like who is going to the slot, but you would have a bunch of really athletic guys who can chase people around in man coverage. Nate Wiggins, there's production on the ball with him. He varies his approach in press coverage. Like he can jam even though he's a lighter guy. He can mirror, he can play trail. Like he's really a special corner. I love his mentality. He's tenacious. He'll get in guys' face and talk shit. I think that the Packers love athletes. They love guys from Georgia, so Lassiter could be in consideration for them there. But yeah, Nate Wiggins to me definitely someone who would be very intriguing. And I've heard that they like that they're not super high on DeJean. I'll say
Oh,
that. DeJean is a common mock for them at
yeah,
25. I asked about it with someone who isn't directly involved with the building, but like a couple as close as I can get as someone from the outside. And he said that maybe they don't love DeJean, but it could be all be a smoke screen.
it could indeed. Nate Wiggins, that would be a pick you obviously be very happy with. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I mean, their pass defense last year was pretty horrendous. They got smoked most games. I don't know if this is a little bit too dear for McKinstry, but looking down the sort of, he's kind of the last CB left. I mean, Laster is there, as you spoke about. I'm gonna go McKinstry. A guy who at the start of the process I feel was ranked way higher than where he is now
Mm-hmm.
on most big boards. He was kind of seen as CB1, and over time that sort of slipped away to sort of 25, 26, 27 range on most people's big boards. But yeah, the Bucks need to get way better in the pass defense, and I think also get better up front. Edge, I could definitely see them going here as well. But for the time being, we will give them Kool-Aid McKinstry, one of the best names I've ever heard in the history
Mm.
of sports.
No doubt about it. And he's just solid. It's almost boring, and I feel like that's why he's fallen a little bit. He's not the fastest guy out there, but he's super technically refined, like never gets targeted. But you look at like Quinion Mitchell, he's 6'1" and ran a 3.3 or 4.3 and checks all these boxes. So you think like, well, his ceiling is higher and he rises up these boards, but maybe it's McKinstry all along. I've got 27, the Arizona Cardinals back up after trading with the Texans last year. And I'll go with the best defensive player on the board right now, which is Byron Murphy the second. He's very sneaky. He's a little bit undersized, but I've seen him like fully lay down on the ground to beat double teams and like pop back up. He's like crawling around, probably on the ground a little bit too often, but he's explosive. He's got some moves. He's got ways to beat doubles. I think that he would be good value for them at 27. They'd come away with who did they take first? Marvin Harrison. He went number 4.
Yeah,
Yeah, he did. Him and Byron Murphy. I think every Cardinals fan would be running laps around the block if those two names were called on draft night.
that would be a pretty good haul for the Cardinals. We're down to the Bills then, the team who we discussed earlier, potentially going receiver in the first round. And the way it's fallen for them, I think Adam A. Mitchell is going to be their pick here. Obviously, we spoke about how their room is just so depleted now. Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel, wide receiver 1 and 2, in maybe that order, maybe not that order. It's just so much of an unknown at the moment. It's strange because when I watched Texas as sort of a casual Longhorns fan, Worthy was always the guy that I still get most of the hype, and he was sort of the guy that maybe obviously because of the speed he showed at the combine would go higher. But I do think that Mitchell's maybe just a more solid all-round receiver. I think Worthy's definitely got issues with obviously his speed is incredible, but I don't know if he's all there on how polished he is. So I'm going to say Mitchell here for the Bills, but I don't really think either of those picks would be bad for them. I just think they need more of a receiver in Mitchell's profile right now.
Yeah, definitely. Mitchell, his biggest question is effort, honestly. Like all the talent is there. He blew up the combine, like he runs great routes. He can adjust and make tough catches. Like he would be a really big swing for Buffalo, but maybe he just has a bad training camp. The coach says, I can't trust this guy to finish routes. I can't trust this guy to take the top off the defense if he knows he's not going to get targeted. And that's why he could fall. But man, in a place like Buffalo, I think that he would lock in because he'd have a chance to get tons of yards, compete for a Super Bowl. Like I would love Mitchell at 28 to the Bills. The Lions, they need a corner. Cam Sutton is having legal issues in their corner room was bad before. I could see them loving DeJean, but there are some questions with him about how he translates it at the boundary and stuff like that. He's been injured through this pre-draft process. We haven't gotten to see him. One guy I love is Kamari Lassiter. He's below TJ Tampa on this big board that we're looking at right here. I do not agree with that. I do not agree with that. I think Kamari Lassiter is potentially the best corner in this draft. He was the most productive in the SEC. I think he only allowed 156 yards all year. He's physical. He will hit you. He is really calm at the point of attack and will break up a ball. Like, not overall great production on the ball, but he just wasn't really targeted much. And when it did come his way, like I have full faith in his ability to get a hand in there and break it up. He's fluid, ran the agility drills, did a great job. Not so fast in the 40, but the quickness almost matters more to me. I really love Kamari Lassiter. He's a kneecap biter. I think he'd fit right in Detroit's culture, and he has a chance to be an elite corner there.
I feel like the Ravens always just get the best players dropping to them in the draft. And I'm looking down this list here. I don't think it will happen this time, but I'm going to draft Ennis Rakestraw Jr. He, if it if it lets me, which it doesn't seem to be doing. Um, the the mock draft might have broken for the time being. Oh, there it is. Okay,
If
well,
not, I can remember these last three picks.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, Rachel Jr. Obviously, the Ravens are sort of their roster's pretty complete. They're in a pretty good spot, but I feel like a guy like Rachel Jr. would really add a different dimension to their corner room. So we are going to go with Rachel Jr. there, and I'll just slowly scroll back through here just before I lose complete responsiveness to this page. 31 then for you for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah. Can you move up on the big board? Just
Yeah, of course.
sweet, sweet. Man, I this one's a little bit tough, but I might go with man. I might go with Christian Haynes out of UConn. He's a guard. They need to get better along their defensive line, and he has been a name that is could maybe sneak into the first round, more of a second rounder, but in a zone scheme like San Francisco is famous for, he does major work. I could see them at the end of the first round saying he does everything we need a guard to do from the backside. Like if he needs to reach someone, he can run in front of them and cut them off. That's that's what you need to do in San Francisco, and he can do it. So he's the best player to us right now. So I'll give him Christian Haynes out of UConn. It's not a sexy pick, but it's happened with San Francisco before that they take an offensive lineman a little bit before the consensus.
I feel like offensive line for San Francisco or corner is definitely going to be their first round pick. Obviously, we saw last year. I feel like their O line got so overrated towards the end of last year. Like everyone saw it as
Mhm.
this massive plus, and I was always like, well, it's good, but I don't think it's great. So I think any chance they can get to improve it would be a good one. Finishing off then with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I feel like this is along with Joe Alt to the Titans at 7 and Dallas Turner to the Falcons at 8. Xavier Worthy to the Chiefs at 32 is probably the way they are going to go. Obviously, like the elite speed, I mean, it's just a match made in heaven for the Chiefs really to replace Tyreek Hill and with all the issues they were having. Because they've never really replaced Tyreek Hill, let's be completely honest. Since he left,
Mhm.
Sky Moore's come in. Rashi Rice, we don't really know what's happening there. He's gotten himself into legal issues during the week. They have added Luis Rees-Summit to their team,
Yes.
the rugby player out of England, actually from my hometown, which is kind of weird, very surreal seeing him
Really?
sign. Yeah, he played for my hometown team. So yeah, very weird now
That's
seeing
wild.
him.
That
See,
is
yeah, I
wild.
know. It's like I saw people like in the NFL community like watching his highlights and stuff, and I was like, this is so weird to me because why is this happening right now? But yeah, no, it's very crazy. He could really be a legit option for them. Obviously, it's really difficult to know whether the athletic side of his game will translate to how well he can actually play the game. But I mean, he has all the tools to make it as a player, and I think especially with the new kickoff rules, he could have a chance to
True.
return kicks. But yeah, Xavier Worthy is just a pretty home run pick for the Chiefs, I think. Do you want to finish then with the Panthers
Oh
number
yes.
33 that we will not leave out because it pretty much is a first round pick, just a little bit off
It's
the
it's
edge.
an uh, it's an honorary one.
Yeah.
Let's see here. I know my Panthers fan co-host of the Stay Hot podcast would want me to take Lad McConkey here, but I'm don't value Lad the same way my esteemed co-host Matthew Sponhour does. Let's see. I'm looking for guys on my big board. I like Troy Franklin a lot. If they want a separator at the wide receiver position, there's more to him than just speed. He was an underrated route runner when I watched him. I kind of thought I was just gonna get, yeah, usually when I watch like these speed guys, Jalen Hyatt was a example last year. Like he's just taking the top off. He's not really running uh, intermediate routes with any kind of nuance. And it's like, okay, like a couple times a year, he'll make a big play. Troy Franklin, he's actually like got a lot of nuance in his route running. He's a better route runner to me in terms of like misdirection and fakes and tempo than even Malik Neighbors is at the top of this draft. It's just that Troy Franklin doesn't have that elite explosiveness. It's more build up speed, and he's not as good after the catch at all. But if you're looking for a fast guy with some ability to make something happen during the route and get open, like I think that he's got a different kind of speed. He can play on the outside, and Ladd really can't. I like Troy Franklin. He's my like fifth or sixth favorite wide receiver, so I'll go with him for the Panthers at 33 to get them involved as the
Always nice
worst
to
team
see.
in the league. It's
Well,
it's
yeah,
tough to be the worst team in the league and have no first round pick.
I
I don't
know.
think we've ever seen anything quite like it before. So I'm sympathetic that they're just completely sad this draft season. They have nothing to show for their terribleness. So yeah, it's only fair to give them a 33 overall nod.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got to give them something to cling on to in these trying times. Okay, then there we go. I was going to say I'll post the results, but the website just crashed, so I will try and go back and redo it as best I can to memory. But
Can you
yeah,
take a screenshot or a video of it and then go back and
oh yeah, it will be on the
look at it?
recording. To
Yeah,
be
yeah,
fair, yeah, I'll go
yeah.
back and edit it. Perfect. That is our mock draft then. And there we go. Theo, thank you very much for joining. Pleasure having you on. Enjoy the rest of the draft season.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Anytime. It's always great to be on and get a little bit of. Is most of your listenership in Britain and London and
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of people sort of listen this side of the pond, but I mean they're kind of a little bit of both, a little bit of both.
well then shout out the UK. That's I don't think I get much access over there. I'm happy to be on the foreign podcast.
Moving over to the foreign, I don't know, stay hot could go global.
It could go global.
Could make its way over here. I'm pretty sure it
I'm
already
sure.
has. I mean, I listen
I'm
fairly
sure. Oh yeah,
regularly. So
of any non-American country, I'm sure listenership in the UK is the highest. But I've, it's good to be on.
yeah,
Talk to some
cheers,
new
man.
new voices. Yeah, cheers.
Absolutely. Thank you everyone else for listening, and goodbye.